Hi everyone, so today we're going to focus on our G's and our J's. When do we spell it? When do we spell it with a G? When do we spell it with a J? And we're also going to focus on our GE's, our GI's, and our GY's. Now we're going to start off understanding our J's. Now the J sound always says J, no matter what. It will never change to anything else. And most of the time you will see J's at the beginning of words and towards the beginning in multi-syllable words. That's where you'll see the majority of your J's. Now, let's go ahead and start with the word justice. See how it starts with a J. And it doesn't matter if it's followed by an E, I, or Y, or any vowel, whatever it's followed by, it will say the J sound. Does that make sense? Justice, justice. And it's saying the J sound. So if you hear the J sound and it's followed by a vowel that is not an E, I, or a Y, you know for a fact it's going to be a J. Now it's easier to read the J sound than it is to spell the J sound. But if you know that it's starting with the J and it is a U or an A or an O, you know, you don't even have to guess. It's going to be spelt with a J. Okay, so now we have the word mojo. This is unusual. Now we do say that. We don't say this word often when we're speaking the English language, but we do use it. And this is unusual for it to be towards the end of a word like this. Okay, boys? Juju. We do use this, but it's unusual. We don't use it all the time in just our regular speaking. And see how this J is followed by a U? So if you're spelling this and it says Jew, you know that it's going to be a U sound. But we do have like J-E-W, but still that says oo or E-U right there. But Jew, Jew. And you could tell that this doesn't even come from our language, and that's where some of these words where the J is in this area, this is not coming from our language. And we know that because it has a U at the end. And U's do not go at the end if it's in the English language. There are exceptions, but they don't. There are exceptions, but if you can just remember that G's really go at the end, then you can remember that. J's, even close to the end, J's will never sit at the end of a word. They just don't. I mean, if they are not really come from the English language, they might, but English words do not have J's at the end. Okay, do you guys remember that? Okay, so now we have puja. This is not an English word. Okay? Jube. So this is saying J. If you're wanting to know and really understand how to spell the J sound, it's really easy if you hear the next letter, oo or ah or o. Anything that is an A, O, or a U, you know it will be spelt with a J. Raja or Raja. This is unusual. It's not an English word where the J sits back here. But what we talked about, the J's, don't they come at the beginning of words or towards the middle? Where's this one at? That is in the center. So you're saying, well, that doesn't really follow. But it does, because this is a Latin root. So you need to actually truly understand your Latin roots. Ject is a Latin root. And so if you can just have this root memorized, it will help you in many words. So this is interjection. So you have a prefix, then you have your Latin root, and then you have your suffix. Okay? Or unit sound. Interjection. Here we are right here. Trajected. You have your prefix, your Latin root, your suffix. Lots of different words. Eject. Eject means to throw. Okay? Introject. You have two right here. Dejection. Prefix, Latin root, suffix. Injection. Prefix, Latin root, suffix. Does that make sense? Prefix, Latin root, and your suffix. So if you can remember that ject isn't G-E-C-T, we don't have a G-E-C-T in our Latin roots. You remember that ject is J-E-C-T. It will help you spell lots of words, lots of more difficult words, lots of words to even read. So rejectee, prefix, Latin root, and a suffix. Objection, prefix, Latin root, and your suffix. Reobjecting. Now you have two prefixes right here. Prefix, prefix, Latin root, and your suffix. So you wouldn't even have to guess because you've learned, you've memorized ject is J-E-C-T. Now, jello, this would be harder to spell because could it be G-E-L-L-O? This is when you have to start studying your spelling words because you could spell it right like that, but it would be wrong. Jeep, see how they're at the beginning of words. These are words that we use often in the English language. Can you guys say that word? Any of you?
Project.
Project.
Oh.
What do you say?
Oh, project.
Okay, so this is actually a French word. And it says projet. This says projet. And there are so many words out there that will be in the French area. And this, if you have an ET at the end of French words, it will say oftentimes, it will say A, like buffet, it ends in an ET. So that's what this word is doing right here. So, and it says J. So you can't even really hear that. So that would be something that you would have to learn how to spell. But here we have eject. This is a prefix. This is your Latin root. Jiffy will be there in a jiffy. It starts with a J. But how do we know that? See how these have E's, I's right here? So it's, which ones do we spell it with, a G or an I? That's when you have to study your spelling words. It's easy to read, but it's harder to spell. Now these are two names, and I have two friends that spell their names like this. One spells it with a J and one spells it with a G. They're both correct. It's how their parents wanted them to spell. Jesse and Jesse. They're spelled the same. Now, if you see, this says Ryaji. Now, if you hear G at the end of the English language, almost always it is going to be spelled with a G-Y. That's how you spell G at the end of words. This is very, very unusual. This does not come from the English language. We do not speak this word in the English. I've never, ever heard anybody speak this word. It would have to fall in the area of people that work in this area, okay? Now, if you look at rejigged, what's happening here? Rejig. It's saying G, but how come it's not switching to the J sound?
Because it's doubled.
Awesome. Okay, so because it's doubled, now this jig is your base word. You have a prefix, a base word, and you have a suffix, but you had to do the doubling rule for this. And so if that happens with your G, so this right here, if it's doubled and you're adding on a vowel suffix, it's not going to switch to a J right here. If it's a vowel suffix that's an E, I, or a Y, it's going to keep the G sound because rig is what you had. See, G's can go at the end. I mean, jig is what you had at the end. G's can go at the end, but J's cannot. And if it's at the end all by itself, it's going to say the G sound. But if you add an E, it's going to say the J sound. If you add an I, it will say J. If you add a Y, it will say J. Okay? So that's how that works right here. But right here, because this is a suffix, an E, I, or Y suffix, and it's doing the doubling rule, it will not change this G sound. So if we look at aged, your base word is age. And we have our suffix ed added onto that. So when you want J to be at the end of a word, you need to spell it GE. That's how you spell the J sound. Okay? So if you have it long like this, it's going to still keep this long. Okay? Aged. Because there's only one letter in the middle. So this E is doing two jobs. It is keeping that to making that say long, and it's keeping that G, it's forcing that G to say the J sound. Same thing here, huge. It's making this G say J, and it's causing this U to say the long U sound. There's only one between it. But if you look at this, what does this word say? Paul, what's this word say?
Edge.
Edge. Well, how come it's short? Yes. So if you want your vowel right next to the J sound, see how this says huge,
No, it's
edge.
G.
If you hear huge, edge, hear how you can hear the J sound right here? But you have to have another letter in here, or it's going to force this right here to be long. So if you want your letter to be the short sound, you have to do a DGE. So DGE followed by a short vowel, it keeps that short. So if you want your vowel to be short, it's got to be a DGE if you want the J sound. Cage, this is long, so it is saying its long sound, and it's doing two things here. It's making that long, and it's keeping that to say J. Now geese, when G is at the beginning and it's followed by an E, I, or Y, it can say G or J. So you might have to play with your word to see if you can figure it out. You can try it both ways, but this says geese, so it can still say G. Now, if it's in the middle of a word or at the end of a word, it will not do that. It only does that at the beginning of the word. I would say most of the time. I would just say it happens. Okay? So, see how page is at the end? But it has to be a GE because we can't do page like this. Because J's can't be at the end. You can't spell it like that. So germ, see how this one is at the beginning and it's saying the J sound? So, and it's followed by an E, I, or Y, so it's switching this G sound. So here it's switching, here it's not switching, okay? Lodge, this is short, so this is a DGE right here. Badge, this is short, so it's a DGE. Edger, this is short, so it's a DGE. Now, edge is your base word, and you're dropping the E and adding on your vowel suffix right there. Hinge. Now, this, since you have a consonant in between it, you don't need the DGE. Hinge. So here, we don't say edge. We don't say edge. We say edge. You leave the D silent. But here, since you have that other consonant in here, that's still short and that's still a one-syllable word. Okay? This would be a closed syllable in this word. So wedge. See how you hear w, edge. You hear the J sound right after the short vowel, then you need to do a DGE. Ledge. It's right after this short vowel, so DGE. Now this says wager. Well, for one, you can hear that this is switching to A, so this is going to say a GE. You do not put a D in there because you want it to be long. If you put a D in here, it would say wadger, wadger. Budge, that is short because this is a DGE. Pager, wage, rage, dodge, short DGE. Nudge, short DGE. Grudge, short DGE. Smudge, this is short DGE. Range, this is really interesting because you will see lots of words like this. This is a unit sound, but it would be rang. A-N-G is a unit sound. But once you put that E on the end, you still have a unit syllable in here, but it's switching. This E is making that G say J. So that says rang, like the phone rang. But now you have a completely different word just by adding the E, range. Avenge, there's a consonant here, so you wouldn't need to do anything with that short vowel. Totally different. So agenda, so this is, see how it's not starting? So the G, this is an E, I, or Y, so it's going to be a G. And that actually makes it tricky. Should I spell it with a J? This is one of those words where you would actually need to really study your spelling to make sure you get this word spelled right. Because it's towards the beginning. We have lots of J's that go towards the beginning that say that. Danger, but this one right here, it's at the end, so you wouldn't really have to guess. This is a G-E-R, because it's towards the end. Charge, this is at the end. If you want the J sound, you have to spell it with a G-E. Fridge, this is a short vowel, and it's followed by a D-G-E. Bridge, short vowel followed by a D-G-E. Now, pageant. Now this one's actually kind of a tricky word. I think it's difficult to spell. And you hear page-unt. That E is there to keep that G to say J. Well, why don't they just spell it with a J? I don't know the reason, but it is there to have that do that. Because this is turning to schwa. Pageant. German. Right there. It's spelled with a G, not a J. Geographic. Now this is fun because you have two G's in here. This G is followed by an E, I, or Y, so it's saying J. This G is followed by not an E, I, or Y. It only changes with 3 letters, so it's going to say G. Geographic. Stagger. How come this says G when it says, how come we don't say stagger? Stagger.
Because it's not accurate.
Because it's a double G, because it's not accurate. Because this is taking the doubling rule. Stag is your base word. It's going to consonant, vowel, consonant before you add on your vowel suffix. So you have to double the G. Vegetarian. Okay? This is changing because this is an E, I, or Y. So subterfuge. Right here, the GE is at the end. Camouflage. Now remember, if you hear age, even though it's not saying J, you know it still needs to be a GE. This is a French word. So AGE either says ij or age. And so see how it's not saying j, it's not saying j, it's saying j. Still spell it with a GE. Managerial. Now this one, look where it's at. Well, you might think, well, this could be a J. Why is it not spelling with a J? What do you think, Dan? This one you could actually really tell why. Because you have your base word. What is it? Manage. So you have a base word here and it says manage. See how right here is at the end of the word right here? Just like this one's at the end. And how do we spell age at the end of our words? A-G-E. So look, now we have a suffix added on to that. We drop our E or just put our R on. Manager. Now we have another suffix, managery. Now we add another suffix, managerial. So we have 1, 2, 3 suffixes added on to this base word that ends in a J sound. So that will help you. If you can make sure that you find your base word, you know that there's no way that that's going to be a J, it's going to be a G-E. Challenger, challenge. See, look, you have a base word, ends in a G-E, and then you have your suffix ER. Generality, now this one says J at the beginning of the word. Arrange, this is J at the end, so you know it's a GE. Here, you would have to, now this one right here though, if you actually studied your Greek combining forms, your Greek words, you would know that this is a G-E-N-E. And you wouldn't have to guess there. You would just know because that tells you this is Greek. So we have Gentile here. See how it starts with a G. Now this could be a true spelling word because do I spell it with a J or do I spell it with a G? Okay? So I'm going to throw in a few dictionary words so that we're understanding our dictionary words better. Now this is often a noun, but it's also, it can be an adjective. So the ethnology of a people you find in the Bible. So that's when you think about it, if that's what it is, it's a people. That's why it's mostly a noun, right? But you can put it as an adjective. We have legion. Now, if you have an I-O-N at the end of a word, and you will have lots of words that end in an I-O-N, and it says yun or un. See, this turns to schwa. And this I is here to keep that G to say J. Well, why don't they just spell it with a J? I don't know. But you have lots of words that will be like this, and you need to study them. I would actually pull out a notebook or something and find words that end in I-O-N or that end with G-I-O-N, and it will help you understand that and be able to spell and read those better. Now, obviously, it's pretty easy to read something like this with if you know that that needs to be an E-I or Y and it's going to force that to say J, but it would be difficult to spell it. Origin. Now this almost sounds like that, but you can hear the in, origin. This says origin. Can you hear the difference? This turns to schwa, and this one actually does say I. So give or geese. Now this is one of those words that does not switch. It says g at the beginning of the word. Now this also, it means give, and I have never heard anybody use this word in the English language. I live in America, never heard of it. People say give, okay? Not saying that somebody doesn't use this word, but this is what we use here when we're speaking English. Gift, see how it's saying g, but it's followed by an E-I or a Y, but it's still saying g. Now, veggie or veggie. Now this is saying G, we're not saying veggie, so it comes off of vegetables, vegetarian. See how this though is an E and this is an I? It's just putting on your suffix. It's just adding it on. Both are correct in the spelling right there. But this right here, this, and I put the G here, it says gig. So if we have a gig, we're gonna play at this certain place with our band. We've got a gig, we've got a new job, that's my gig. So this is spelled like this with a G-I-G, and both of them are saying g. But why is this one still saying g? Why is this one saying g and it's not, it's followed by an E-I or Y? Why, Dan?
Because it's doubled.
Because it has the doubling rule right here, boom. Does that make sense, Paul? So we don't say diggage. We just gigged. That's what that word says. Gigged. Gigged. Okay? Magic. See, this is towards the end, so it's a G-I-C. Now we have this word, we have virgin. See, it's like origin, and you hear virgin, in this word. So the definition of this has a lot of meanings, different meanings, and I thought it was kind of fun. So the Virgin Mary, so like the mother of Jesus, or we have not processed or refined, so a food that hasn't been processed or refined differently. So happened for the very first time. So you might think of the virgin voyage of a ship or a plane, or whatever it means, it was done the very first time, it sailed the first time, it flew the first time. You often hear it with ships and planes. So coming from the first press. Now I buy virgin coconut oil, and I sometimes will buy extra virgin coconut oil. So they still both come from the very first press, but the extra virgin is like the very first stuff that's starting to come out. But the virgin coconut oil is still the first press, but it's not the very first, the stuff that's coming out. So if you get anything that doesn't say virgin or extra virgin, you know it's coming and it's more processed. They have to heat it up or something like that to get the rest of the stuff out, and you won't get as a coconutty flavor. So you're going to get that in virgin olive oils, lots of oils. That's where it's coming from, the very first press. And I thought this one was fun, not traveled upon. So virgin snow, it means that nobody's walked in it, nobody's passed through it. Or you can say a virgin forest. That means nobody's gone in and messed with the forest. We live in a forest, and this forest is definitely been messed with, right guys? We've cut down trees, we've done lots of things here, but this means that nobody has done that. Okay? So, now this is unusual. This would be a true sight word. This is a vogie. It stays the G sound. Okay? Unusual. Now we have druggy. Your base word is drug, you're doubling it, and you're adding on your vowel suffix. So fogging. So we have fog is our base word, so it's keeping the G sound, even though it has an E, I, or Y here, because this is doubled. Your base word is fog, consonant, vowel, consonant. Germ, this starts the word. It's followed by an E, I, or Y. This needs to be a true spelling word. Same with this. Gem, it's still forcing, that is forcing this G to say J. Okay? So we have like geek right here. It's totally slang. It's not changing in this word. So geek, it's slang. And I really wanted to point out in this dictionary word how our language changes as we change, as our cultures change. So in the 1900s, early 1900s, geek actually meant a carnival person biting the head off of a live chicken. So you don't see that anymore. That person was called a geek, and it was totally slang. Now, and this is still slang, it's still considered slang, and you will still see this, but not as much as even when I was in school. Peculiar person, overly intellectual. So if somebody was crazy smart, you call them a geek. And I don't see that as often nowadays.
Or a nerd.
Yeah, or you see them being called a nerd. So now when you look at the third definition of geek, an expert in computers, and this is actually really what you see geek referred to the most right now in our time. And I just think it's fun how a word can change through time. So when you think of the Geek Squad at Best Buy, here in the United States, that is a place where you can go buy a lot of technology things. And the Geek Squad is all about your computers and fixing them and making sure that they're working correctly. Okay, generative. Look at this. This is a Greek. This right here, gene or gen, however, in this word it's generative. This is Greek. If you learned how to spell that Greek combining form that we've talked about in another lesson, this will help you spell this word. Bagging. Well, you have a base word here, bag, and it calls for the doubling rule. So consonant, vowel, consonant. So it's doubled and you're adding on your vowel suffix that starts with an I. So we don't say bag gene. It just stays the G sound. Bag. And that's all you keep it as. So if you had that, bag, gene, that's kind of what you would think that it might say like that, but it's not. You keep it the G sound. Rejigged. Now, we talked about a gig. See right there? But see, sometimes we have words that actually do start. The base word in this is a jig. And this is something that you would fish with. There's other terms for it, but we just got a new little fishing boat in our family and we are going to put jigs on so we can catch our fish. Anyways, see how you can have ones that start with J's and one that starts with G's, and this says gig and this says jig. But see, we still have the same thing here where you have this vowel right here, and we don't say rejigged, rejigged. We say rejigged. Okay? This stays the same sound. Puja. Now remember, this does not happen very often. This is not in our language. So this typically would be a G, but if it is right here, this is not an E, I, or Y, so you really can't have a G here. You would have to have like P-U-G-I-A. Something like that. That's why it's spelt like this, and that's why the J is towards the end. So if you have a J towards the end, the J sound with a vowel like this, it will probably turn like this, but you don't see them as much towards the end. Clergywoman. Well, this is in the middle of a word, but why is it a G? It's towards the beginning. Why is
Because it's compounded.
Nice, it's a compound word. And so we have clergy and woman. So clergy is its very own word. Woman is its very own word. So look, this word actually ends with a GY. How do we end our words when we want it to say G? Boys? With GY, right? That's how we want to end our words if we want it to say G. Most of the time, almost always. So that's why it would be like here. But this is a Greek word. Now, here you think, well, maybe this could be a Greek word because if you have a Y in the middle or towards the beginning, you would think maybe this could be Greek. But this isn't. So check and see. Is it a compound word or not? But this is a Greek word right here. See how it starts with a GY, so you know it's Greek. And this will help you think, oh, gypsum. Yeah, honey. And oftentimes, if you can tell that it's Greek, this will most likely turn to the J sound. Like gyms. See? This comes from the Greek sound. So Greek will be science, medical, animals, anywhere in that. But also, if you think about the Greek words for gymnasium, that's where the Olympics came from, the Greek culture, and they always exercised and competed with one another. And that's where you get the gym, the gymnasium. So gym is short for gymnasium. But that's why you would have it a GY. And that helps you identify it. If you can think, oh, well, that's Greek, then you would know that you would spell it with a GY and not a JI or JY, okay? Twiggy. Now you have a base word here, that's twig. And Then you have a consonant, vowel, consonant. You double it before you add on your vowel suffix. What's your base word here, Paul? Okay, so this is fog, is your base word. So you have a consonant, vowel, consonant. It's doubled. So it still says g, and it doesn't say foggy. Okay? Jiggy. Okay? Your base word is what, Daniel?
Jig.
Jig. So your consonant, vowel, consonant, you double it before you add on your vowel suffix. A jiggy. Saggy. What's your base word?
Sag.
Sag. It's a consonant, vowel, consonant, you double it. So it's keeping the sound right here, and it's not turning to the j sound. Allergy. So it's at the end of a word right here. So Greek words start more towards the beginning with the Y. But see, American or the English language is, if you want it to be allergy, if you want it to say G at the end, it's going to be a GY. Splurgy, same thing here, GY. So you have a base word here that would say splurge, ends with a GE. You drop the Y, drop the E, and put your Y in there. Now this says gyrofrequency. Is this a Greek word?
Yes.
Yeah, this right here is Greek. And when you have it in the science field, I noticed that this will say gyro, but this right here says yarrow, or it would say jarro. The G is almost dropped. Now this is a food. If you go to a Greek restaurant, or we've gone to the Greek festivals where we live, and these are super yummy. Yeah, honey.
So, can you tell it's Greek when there's like a GY at the beginning of the word?
Yes.
Just a Y.
So GY, this identifies that this is most likely Greek. Okay? So like gyrus, GY, this is Greek right here. So now let's look back at religion. So this is in the middle of a word, and this says jun. When you hear that, most likely it will have an ION. If you hear un, and this turns to schwa, you can't hear that I. It makes that say j, religion. Now homegirl, you think, well, maybe, why don't we have a J here? Well, this is a compound word right here. And we have home, and we have girl, and this G is saying the G sound. Why, you would think, well, why isn't it turning to J? Because G say G at the beginning of a word, so that's why this is still saying G, and not saying drill, home drill. Can you see that? So, right here, when you have drama all by itself, this is changed a little bit, and it says dramaturgic. See, it's at the end of the word, and oftentimes you'll see this, the IC is selling this, that it could be a Greek word right here. Now this, you can tell that this is Greek immediately by how?
Gen?
Yeah, gen, right? That is a Greek word. And how about tele? Right? Means distance, far away, right? Now, illegible. That's in the middle of a word right here. Legal. But look at what happened here. This is an A. It's not an E, I, or a Y. So it's not G to say the G sound. So this G will only change when you say what different sounds. Using what different vowels. Which ones? E's, I's, and Y's. See, since that's an A, it's going to stay the G sound. Original. That switches right here because this right here is an E, I, or Y. Unoriginal is what that says. Illogic, that is changing because that is an E, I, or a Y. Rigging. Now how come this is not changing? Because it's doubled. You have a consonant, vowel, consonant. It's keeping the rig base word. Bagging. You have a consonant, vowel, consonant. Your base word is bag. So you're going to double it, and it's keeping your g sound off of this, even though this is an E, I, or a Y. Girlish. Now, girl just starts with a g sound, even though this is an E, I, or a Y. This is something you have to study and know that girl is G-I-R-L. Logging. Paul, what's your base word here? Log. So it's going to keep the g sound when you double it and you add on your ing suffix. Gun. Now this says gun because why?
There's no
EI.
There is no E, I, or Y. You don't even have to hesitate. It is going to say g without hesitation. You don't even have to guess there because that's not. So remember, beginning words could say j or g, but here you know it's g because that's not an E, I, or Y. Goggles, same with here. That's not an E, I, or Y, so you don't even have to guess it right here. Same here. That's not an E, I, or Y. It's saying the g sound. So shortage. How do you spell age at the end of a word, boys? A-G-E, right there, A-G-E. So if you hear idge, but see here the j sound is a G-E. It's part of this unit sound. And this means a lack or a want, which we have lots of shortages. We've had that since COVID, and a lot of people have lacked and we're in want of things. But we have colleague. This is really interesting, but look what's going on here. Why didn't we just spell it colleague and left the UE off of it? This is telling you that this is Latin. It's kind of from the French origin. Now, when you have the word like log, like a prologue at the end of a word, they actually have dropped the UE on the end, and you could spell it L-O-G, or you could spell it L-O-G-U-E, but they have not done it on these words yet. I wouldn't doubt it if in the future that they did. It's so much easier to spell. But this says G. It's keeping, this is a U, so it's keeping that G. So we have legal again, right here. It's G because that is not an E, I, or Y. Counterchanging. This is a big old long compound word. One word, two words. This right here, change, is part of a unit sound, and it would say chang if you didn't have this suffix. It used to be C-H-A-N-G-E. You drop the E and add your suffix ing right here. Okay, so let's go to giraffes. That is an E, I, or a Y, so it's saying J. Now this I thought was fun. This says gibbous. It is saying the G sound. It's not changing. It's at the beginning of a word right here. And this says gibbles. It's not changing. Or I have heard it gibbles. So either way. Now look, lodging. This is a DGE because that's short. So it's saying J. Piggish. This is not changing to G because your base word is pig right here. And so you keep this sound, the pig sound. And we have digital. This G is saying J because that is an E, I, or Y. So GEs, they sit at the end of a word and the middle. But if you want J sound at the end of a word, you have to spell it with a GE. They are at the end of words. Anyways, I hope this helps you with your spelling.